Hello everyone, good day. So for today, we will tackle about the difference between gender and sex.
I know that we all have an opinion or a personal idea of what really is the difference between gender and sex, what is sex and what is gender. So let us start our presentation to fully understand what is their difference. So we have here a guide question, which is, what is the difference between gender and sex? So let us start with sex. Sex refers to the biological characteristics or natural biological differences between men and women. For example, the difference in the organs related to reproduction. Example of the organs are genitalia, chromosomes. These are the organs which are determined at birth. And a person's sex is biologically determined as female or male according to certain identifiable physical features which are fixed. Example for this are breasts or hairs, which are the secondary sex characteristics. So let us proceed with gender. Gender refers to the cultural, socially constructed differences between the two sexes. It also refers to the way society encourages and teaches the two sexes to behave indifferent through socialization. So it means that it does not exist naturally, but is instead a concept that is created by cultural and societal norms. So here is a diagram which are how sex and gender are biologically and culturally defined. So sex is biologically defined for female and male because of chromosomes, reproductive organs, and genitalia, and also hormones. And for gender, gender is culturally defined for female, roles and responsibilities, caring, service jobs, attributes, fragile, emotional entitlements, inferior healthcare to men, financial dependence. And for male, gender is culturally defined, roles and responsibilities, construction, defense, attributes, risk-taking, aggression, entitlements, higher workforce participation, and financial autonomy. Let's proceed with the chart. Difference between gender and sex. So we have this attributes, sex or a biological difference, gender, the social difference. So the definition of sex, biological or cosmological difference. So biological means this is given at birth, and gender, social, not natural difference. So not natural difference because it does not occur naturally. Meaning, sex refers to physiological characteristics. For example, the facial hairs and the breast of women and men. And the gender refers to social cultural expectations though. So this is the social or cultural expectations of people of what you are and who you are and who you want to be. So the aspect of change, difficult to change the sex when born as male or female. So it is difficult to change, and thus gender can be changed since gender identity is determined by society. So gender can be changed time to time. So so aspect of role, throughout the history and across culture, sex differences exist. Gender, at different times in history and different societies, gender roles are different. So we have this gender roles in our society of how you would act in this particular society. In the aspect of policy, policies respond to sex differences in areas to do with physical body. And gender policies can respond to gender stereotype and traditional gender roles. Next is the concept of gender, sexuality, and development. So, gender. Gender is a culture-specific construct. There are significant differences in what women and men can or cannot do in one culture as compared to another. But what is fairly consistent across cultures is that there is always a distinct difference between women's and men's roles. access to productive resources, and decision-making authority. So we all know that in every culture around the world, there are significant or there are assigned roles of women and men. Typically, men are being responsible for the productive activities outside the home, like doing heavy works, while women, they're just staying at home, washing clothes, taking care of babies, and doing household chores, and many more, which is related with home. Sexuality. Sexuality is a social construction of a biological drive. It is defined by whom has sex with, in what ways, why, under what circumstances, and with what outcomes. It is more than sexual behavior. It is a multidimensional and dynamic concept. So, human sexuality, it also refers to the people's sexual interest in and attraction to others, as well as their capacity to have erotic differences and responses. So there are aspects of sexuality like biological and physical aspect, emotional aspects, social aspects, and spiritual aspects. And let us proceed with the development. The four main gender narratives that identifies in a development discourse. The first one is the Women in Development Approach, or the WID. Second is Gender in Development Approach, which is the GAD. The third one is the Post-Structuralism Theory, and the last one is the Human Rights-Based Approach, or the HRBA. Let us start with the first one, which is Women in Development Approach, or the WID. In the late 1970s and 1980s, the WID approach became popular in the development field as a result of the concern that women are being left out of economic development process. The approach focused on the inclusion of women in development as tool to increase the economic and social efficiency of development processes. The second one is the Gender in Development Approach, or the GAD approach. The GAD approach sought to challenge root causes of gender inequality and increase women's access to resources and decision making. This approach focused on empowerment, or increasing the agency of women and giving them power to control their own lives, not just for men, because before men are responsible for the decision making, but with this GAD approach, women can also have the power to control their own lives. Next is the post-structuralism theory. Post-structuralist theories critique a number of development practices and methodologies, particularly the power relations perpetuated by concepts such as development assistance and women in the developing world. These theories draw from post-colonial literary and cultural studies and assess the influence of colonialism on the development of conceptions of gender subheading. And the last one, or the fourth approach, is the human rights-based approach, or the HRBA, an overarching and development approach that has been applied to education is the HRBA. It is based on the belief that education is universal, not just for men, because before men are just education is just for men, and women are just staying at home, and so inalienable human right that is interdependent with other basic human rights. Gender dynamics. Gender dynamics include the relationships and interactions between and among boys, girls, women, and men. Gender dynamics are informed by social-cultural ideas about gender and the power relationships that define them. Gender dynamics is nothing but the way in which men and women are treated or behave differently in society, either with their own gender or with each other. So, for example, a lesbian is in love with a transgender. This is part of the gender dynamics. Or example is a transgender is participating in a pageant. Another example is man is attracted to a lesbian. So it has they can men and women can act or act in what they want to in this society.
Social construction of gender. The idea that gender difference is socially constructed is a view present in many philosophical and sociological theories about gender. According to this view, society and culture create gender roles, and these gender roles are prescribed as ideal or appropriate behavior for a person of that specific gender. So when we say gender difference is socially constructed, it is an idea that has been created and accepted by the people in a society. The following are social constructions of gender. The first one is gender-based harassment. The second is adolescent view of adulthood. The third is depression, and fourth is body image, and lastly, the fifth one is education. And now for the first one, which is the gender-based harassment. Transgender people can also be identified as androgynous. Androgynous typically used to describe a person's appearances for clothing for having elements of both femininity and masculinity. So, androgynous, for example, when a female possesses both stereotypically female and stereotypically male characteristics. She may be dressed in clothing typically associated with a man or expresses herself in a more aggressive or assertive manner. In continuation, transsexualism also exists where a person who is born as one sex and brought up in that sex has a gender identity of that opposite sex and wishes to live as that gender. Like, for example, a trans man is a person who was assigned the female sex at birth on the basis of his genitals, but despite that, he identifies as a man and is transitioning or has transitioned to a male gender role. Adolescent view of adulthood. Gender is a cultural construction which creates an environment where an adolescent's performance in high school is related to their life goals and expectations. Because most young women know what they want to be mothers and wives. The choice of professions and future goals can be inherently flawed by the gender constraints. So in this stage, increasing maturity comes with expectations that make independent decisions and become self-sufficient. Adulthood will make us open-minded in more things such as married life or any other future goals. Moving forward to the third one, which is depression. High school is a large transitional period for teenagers, causing them to cope with these various transitions in different ways. Some negotiate the passages easily, whereas others develop serious behavioral and psychological problems. One of the psychological problems is depression. Depression can be isolating, and without proper academic and societal support, high school can be challenging. So yes, this is one of the most major problems that any of us may face. This may come in any areas in our life, but however, in high school years, this stage is our biggest transition in life. It affects our school performance, relationship between the others, sexual orientations, and many more. Sometimes, it may result from environmental stress. Body image. Factors that affect body image includes sex, media, parental relationship, and puberty, as well as weight and popularity. The intersectionality of these factors causes a unique experience for adolescents during this period within their lives. Body image is closely linked to psychological during adolescence and can cause harmful effects when a child has body dissatisfaction. So yes, indeed body image is really important, especially in this stage. We become body conscious, and worse, we think that we have to be beautiful or handsome in order to fit in that society. But that is definitely wrong, because we are beautiful in many different ways. Education is the next one. So Yes. Teachers who endorse the dominant gender role stereotype regarding the distribution of talent between males and females distort their perception of their students' mathematical abilities and efforts resources in mathematics. Teachers who do not endorse the gender role stereotype affect how they perceive male and female students' abilities in mathematics to a greater extent. So, in this slide, stereotyping is mentioned. Comparing male and female in the field of education can really affect to us individuals and might hinder our confidence to show up. Gender Parity Index or GPI. It is a socioeconomic index usually designed to measure the relative access to education of males and females. So this index is released by UNESCO. It is the simplest form and it is calculated by the quotient of the number of females by the number of males enrolled in a given stage of education, such as primary, secondary, and etc. So, as long as a person's perceived psychological sex is consistent with that person's gender identity, the gender role of a person is so much a matter, of course, in a stable society that person rarely even think of it. In Western society, there is a growing acceptance of such transgendered and intersexed people. However, there are some who do not accept these people and may react violently and prosecute them. This kind of negative value judgment is sometimes known as transphobia. So yes, transphobia describes someone who has hate, fear, or disgust for transgender people or anyone who does not fit into the female or male gender binary. Like, for example, a transphobic person may express disgust for a tomboy for a masculine-appearing person wearing a dress. Another example would be someone no longer wanting to continue a friendship after finding out their friendship is a transgender. These are just few interpersonal examples of transphobia that do not represent the whole scope of the issue. Transphobia, in other words, is afraid or fear of transgender. Nevertheless, such cases of mismatch between a person's physiology, identity, and role are relatively rare. A large majority of people have matching genitalia and gender identities, and their gender role is commensurate with their genitalia. So yes, I think that would be all for today. But let me share to you a quote from Marsha P. Johnson, which we have here. We have to be visible. We should not be ashamed for who we are.